I will always value professional development first. Now I have a business, right? So obviously I have to be able to spend time on the other stuff. But it's like if I had 1 hour in the day and I had to choose learning how to market or learning how to be a better PT, I'm using it on learning how to be a better PT, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's like if you're really good at what you do, some of the other stuff isn't as important because your skill set is what's going to help sell yourself to begin with.
All right, you badass clinicians. We got a great episode for you guys today. Good friend of mine, Jeremy Pastor. I mean, this guy's my day one. We started together in the trenches before he left me. We can talk about, you can clearly see that I'm still bitter about I have abandonment issues, and now we're going to address this. Other than that, man, he's a great clinician, great business owner. He owns Game Changer Physical Therapy down in, is it South Jersey?
Central Jersey.
All right. Central Jersey exists to some people. To most people, it's South Jersey. So you guys can look it up and decide for yourself. But hey, man, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. This is the first time that I actually saw like this place, and I always see it through your Instagram. So, it's awesome to see this thing like in person because you've done a really good job here.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're always part of my journey, especially when we were working together during our lunch break. We would go like talk outside.
I think it's always helpful for you to learn what not to do in a professional setting, right?
Yeah. So like when you're in a bad situation and you have a good friend that you work with, and you need to just air out some stuff, just go outside. Don't do it in your place of work. Go to like a local quick check.
Yeah, laughing turns into crying really quickly.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, laugh, cry. We laugh, cry a lot. So I don't know if you guys know, but we used to have this page called The Movement Guys, whereas Jeremy and I, and then our good friend Jamie, we would stay after work. This is like 9 o'clock at night, and batch record content. This is not earlier Instagram days, still like 2017. Kind of.
I was new to it.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't on the app before that point, so I knew nothing about it. Yeah.
So Jeremy's already a boomer in the tech field, so we kind of bring him back a little bit. But it just kind of like this is the kind of relationship that that we had, right? Where we work the same shift, 12 to 8 every single day together. We grind together and we stay late to create some more content just because we kind of knew that's the direction the field's heading. And then all three of us were like super young. Like you graduated before me, and then I came in, and then Jamie came in. And then from there, we were just kind of doing things a little bit differently compared to other therapists that was at the company we were at. And I mean, luckily, I was thankful for this because we were doing all the different things, but we support each other, and therefore it was really justifiable that we were down the right path. Because if it was just me doing all like the string-based stuff, a lot of people will question it, and therefore I would probably retreat and then go back to treat the way that other people would treat, that was the norm. And I quote the word norm back then. And now, I mean, it's almost like the standard what we used to do, right? So, I mean, let's dive in a little bit, man. Let's talk about your career path, and like even in baseball to how you are now as a PT and how you're able to help people.
Our experience working together, you, me, Jamie, right? Like, and we were like a couple months apart with graduating. It's hardly like I was there years before you, right? But I think that, all three of us were very raw. Like we were new grads, right? Yeah. If I look back at what I did, I would say that I was a terrible therapist. But I think that like us working together and at least having like that small thought in the back of our mind where it's like, stuff doesn't make sense was enough to kind of push us to look for answers, right? Where I would agree. I think you kind of touched on it. It's like if we didn't all work together, and this is definitely not a shot at anyone, I just think that it would have been a lot easier to just conform to what was happening around you. And that's not just where we were working. That's, anywhere that you're working with a large group of people, right? So I think that, us three latching onto each other, it was kind of like, I don't think any of us had the answer, but like we all kind of had questions, and then we were hungry. We wanted to do more. We didn't want to just kind of, show up at 12, leave at 8 and go through the motions. So I do think that kind of started the drive to at least be better. And then, I think for us, when we realized that there was going to be a little bit of, I guess, monotony in the process, or maybe like some part of the schedule not allowing for us to grow the way that we wanted to from a professional standpoint, that's when we realized like, okay, let's look to see what else is potentially out there for ourselves. But, speaking about kind of like my path, like baseball's been my sport my whole life. But that's the only thing that I did competitively, but I really did play every single sport. I always said like I was kind of good at everything, not great at anything from a sports standpoint. So played baseball in college. So my intro into physical therapy was kind of a very cliche intro, right? It's like I was an athlete that got hurt a couple times. Luckily, knock on wood, like nothing ever like too significant. But I had experience in the rehab world as the patient, and I'm, again, in hindsight, looking back on it, it wasn't a very high quality experience, but it was enough to introduce me to the field that I wasn't otherwise aware of. And actually, my oldest brother, who now is a doctor, he's going to be going into emergency medicine. He was originally, when he was an undergrad, he was going the pre-physical therapy route. And that was my intro to, hey, what's physical therapy? Because I was always interested in exercise, whatever that meant, right? Like, I didn't want to be a personal trainer, but I was interested in being active and helping people. Didn't want to go the medical route because I don't do blood and needles, right? Yeah. So it's like, what?
Oh, yeah, that's true. I forgot you have that.
Yeah, well, that's
that childish fear.
Yeah. So what field exists that allows you to do all those things, right? So, I was introduced to the field and got hurt a couple times. My brother was going this route. I go to school, and let's be real, like I wasn't the world's most motivated college student. I can't say there's a whole lot of them anyway, right?
Yeah.
But, so go through college, played baseball. So my ability to go through some of these expedited like PT programs didn't exist just because of the baseball schedule. Couldn't fit the number of credits in order to do like a 3+3 program, which you hear a lot of students do. So I went, got my bachelor's degrees in undergrad, took a year off, worked in PT full time as like an aide. Again, not the greatest experience, but I think it was important just from a patient care standpoint, from a communication standpoint, from walking people through exercises, regardless if they're exercises that I use today, right? Like the experience of working with people and getting comfortable meeting new people and talking people through things that are new to them was, I think, helpful. And also was my way to make a little bit of money and over that year build my resume from like an experience standpoint. And then I applied on my own, was fortunate enough to go through the schooling process and, had a good experience at Drexel, met a lot of really good people. And then from there, right, it brought us to our first job together. So, I don't really have like this huge like motivational story as to like what drove me into the field. But what I will say, and I'm very honest in saying this, I think that I've been very lucky along the way with being introduced to people who've been able to kind of bring me to that next step or answer that next question that I have. So, when I decided to kind of pivot from our first job and look for a second job, I actually left for a part-time job. And not a lot of people know that. I think that I was at a point where I was very frustrated and I just knew that I wanted something different, and I left. And I had actually moved to the Morristown area to take our first job. So I was still on a lease, all this stuff. So I left and I joined another business on a part-time basis, and they kind of had me out of a couple different locations. I think it was like 15 hours a week to start. And I kind of bet on myself. I thought to myself, like, listen, I'm going to do well enough where they're going to see that they're going to want me full-time. And I just took the leap. So I finished out my lease in Morristown, and I believe it was less than a month. It might have even only been a couple weeks before they made me full time, which again, there was luck involved with that, genuinely, because I think I was in our Hackensack location at the time, and they were actually opening a brand new location down in Manalapan, which is right next to where I grew up. So it was like this perfect storm of they had this new PT who came on part-time who's actually from the area of a brand new location they're trying to build out. They had a team in place to start that location, but at the same time, it was kind of like the perfect place to then place me. And then I kind of was able to come back to like the Monmouth County area and help them build that location. Then I was with that business for about 3 years, kind of like climbed the ranks. I actually helped them open a number of different new locations, just kind of like being placed in a spot for a couple months as they were opening up, and then that was ready. And then I was clinic director of a couple different spots in Monmouth County. And then actually, due to a number of different reasons, just from like their own business decisions, they had decided that our Monmouth County location, they were going to be closing. There was just some stuff with some landlords and some like business relationship stuff that I think they wanted to get out of. So when they were deciding to close the Monmouth County location, they wanted me to come up here, come up to Montclair and some of their North Jersey locations. But we had basically just bought a house in Howell. again, in Monmouth County. So I basically had to decide, do I want 5 days a week, hour and a half commute, right, to stay with a company that I was, I had a good experience, I was valued, I was in a pretty good spot, or do I use this as an opportunity to build my own thing, which was something that I was planning to do, but I think that I was planning to do it over the next year or two, right? That kind of like arbitrary time frame that everyone's like, yeah, I'll do it in a year or two, right? Like there's no real...
there's no like real matrix of like, if I do this and that,
There was no reason, right? Like I just told myself like, I want to give myself more runway, whatever that meant, right? I actually had a 30 days notice. I had 30 days notice like, hey, I don't remember the month. I think it was August, like on August 1st. By the way, August 30th, we're out of here. So like when your back's against the wall, you just kind of make things happen, right? So I worked pretty hard to try to find a place, right? Like a gym to set up a table in, or to find an office, right? And then September of 2019, right, is when I started Game Changer PT, and again, did it really quick, kind of learned on the fly. And then, here we are over 3 years later, and somehow it's still open. So
I mean, listen, man, no surprise there. I want to go back to the betting on yourself part, because obviously I know your story, and I know the situation you were in, but clearly there's a sense of forging your own path there to force you to take a leave of to work for like 15 hours a week. So can we talk and can we expand a little bit on that? Because I know there's a lot of people who are listening that are in the same situation. It's very sticky. They might feel a little bit desperate. They might feel a little lost. Let's talk about your thought process of how you make that justification, knowing that the bill's still the same, student loan's still the same, but now the earning potential is less. But you then say, hey, well, but then I have a bigger upside. So how do you, because I know you're logical, very logical. So I want to hear your thought process on it, because most people that listen to this, most PT are very logical. If they can hear your justification, then maybe they say, oh, well, perhaps I don't have to stay in a bad situation.
It's hard to remember like what I felt in that moment, and then like 7 years later having the experience I have now, looking back on it through a different lens. Because I think now in hindsight I look back on it and it's like some of the decisions I made at that time were just like very naive, right? For example, I think I remember when I was interviewing for my first job, I was choosing between different places, and I was like, I chose that job because of a couple different things, but like for the most part it was the difference of like $2,000, which on a paycheck is like $40. Right? Like if that's depending on a lot of different things.
Tax.
Right. Silly tax. Right. So like there are decisions at that point in your career that you make that you think are done with really like well thought out plans, and really it's just like no, you're being sold on some stuff, and then you're lying to yourself as to why you choose to do certain things. But with respect to like betting on myself, I think that I got to a point, I don't like openly speaking about like people, right? But if I speak about it like kind of vaguely, it's that I didn't see my specific opportunity or my experience being something that was going to push me in the direction that I wanted to go professionally. And I could have been patient if that were the only thing that was happening. Meaning like I could have seen it out, just built some experience, made some money. Like I liked the people we worked with, right? Like we didn't have terrible times, right? We had some fun there, right? And that's like from people at the front desk to our aides to colleagues, right? Like we weren't like miserable people, right? But I think that for me personally, like knowing my own personality, it's like when I experience something that gets me frustrated, it tends to snowball in my mind, and then it's like the only thing that I could think about. And then I can't really focus on the other positives that I was enjoying. I only like fester on that thing that was frustrating to me. And for me, it was patient care, right? Like it's like when I know that I can't do the best for this person, or I'm not going to be able to improve to be better for this person, or I see something happening that I know is negatively influencing somebody 5 feet from me, I get frustrated. Right. And again, I try really hard not to make other people uncomfortable. So I don't like actually pointing those things out, but I internalize it, and then I get frustrated, and then I decide like I need to get out of this situation. To answer your question with respect to like the people that that might be dealing with something similar. I mean, I don't think you're trapped anywhere, right? Like, especially in physical therapy, right? There are jobs, right? And also even more so now, right? People are opening their own places left and right? Like everyone's joining a mentorship, like first chance they get, and they're learning how to sell themselves, and they're learning how to market and build their own thing. And I think that the important thing is if you feel like you're stuck, I think the very first thing that you need to do is realize, like, especially in some of these larger corporations, to either replace or supplement the money that you're getting paid is not that difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just speak openly about my first job. My first salary was $72,000.
Yeah, that's what we all got paid.
Yeah, like in plus or minus, right? Like I'm sure there was some differences, right? And I was right out of school, right? So brand new grad in North Jersey making $72,000. You break that down to hourly. It's like what, like in the 30s, I think, right? So it's like, okay. That's the number, right? Like that's the number that you need to match or supplement in order to make what you want to or more, right? Yeah. And then obviously if you open your own thing, you have to understand the expense element of it and taxes and things like that, right? But it's like never do you hear people talk about their salary from an hourly wage standpoint, right? It's like, how different is that $72,000 salary from like an hourly wage that you would be like, oh, I'm not accepting that to be a physical therapist.
Yeah.
Right. And it is what it is, right? Like that's how that business was run, right? To each their own, right? If you want to run your business, you run it however you want, right? But it's up to the employee as to whether or not I want to accept this, or if I want to bet on myself, bet on my skill set, which again, at that time, I'm not even going to pretend like I had a skill set, right? But I foresaw that I was going to work hard enough to be better at what I did, right? Then you have to decide like, okay, what do I need to do in order to make this move necessary? Yeah. Right. And at that time, to be honest, like my decision making was based purely off of getting out of a situation. Yeah. Like, you know, I'm not going to say that it was super calculated at that time, but I bet on myself to expect to be full time at my next position fairly quickly. And I figured for a short period of time, I'll eat the difference in order to be happy.
Yeah. And I like asking you this kind of question because it gave you retro perspective, which removed the emotion out of it. Right. So now we're approaching from like a logical standpoint at the highest form, right? Because and if I were to ask you when you were making that decision, there's no way I would get a straight answer. There'll be a lot of things tie into it. And a couple things that I would love to touch on too is like, I love that, you know, obviously we were in a setting, was three an hour, you know, is high volume, like standard. Like when I say high volume, this is standard back then. Sure. Right? There's a place like yours, a place like mine didn't exist, right? Not really. And what happened then is like we, like as PTs, we crave control. That's why we're in the medical setting, right? You want stability. With stability come control, predictability when it comes to your life. And when it comes to your schedule, if you have high volume, high caseload, there's no predictability when it comes to your quality of care. And I think that's why most of us get super frustrated. It's always coming from a place of we want to do more for the patient. And because we can't do more now, we're super frustrated and we feel less than what we could have done. And I what I like to applaud you on was the first thing you did was you took control of your clinical care, right? And most people, and I met people who were frustrated at the model, but the model doesn't matter too. If you work in a one-on-one setting like ours, if you're not a good PT, you're not a good PT. Right. You just have an hour of like bullshitting people, right, and you're not getting them better either. So if you're not good, doesn't matter how much time you have, you have to be good. And I always go back and reflect that it's a blessing in the sky that we had to work with 20 minutes of patient care because we had to get really good at getting people better in 20 minutes. And because we were able to do under those time constraints when we open our own place and we offer one-on-one care. Now we got even better, right? Because it's like just, you know, it's a compound effect when it comes to our care. But if you weren't good and you weren't investing in your clinical care, and I've talked to a PT student who, when I first graduated, I couldn't wait to take auto con ed course because I'm no longer confined to what the PT school is teaching me. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited to take all this X, Y, and Z con ed course because I'm looking to learn the way I want to actually learn the way I want to treat. But when I meet with students who apply for a job here and they say, oh, I'm not interested in taking a con ed course because I just took my board. And to me, like, that's a red flag because then you're not really in it for the right reason.
I mean, I'll tell you, and again, I'm very honest with myself. Like, I was brainwashed coming out of PT school. Yeah. And not intentionally. I'm not blaming school. Yeah. But I mean, like, I was drinking the Kool-Aid of like, I was brilliant, right? Like, oh, I played a college sport, right? So I'm an athlete. So that means I know how to work with athletes, right? Anyone who played baseball, I know exactly what they need, right? Because I experienced it, even though, right? Whatever that means. Went to a good school. I got good grades. I passed my boards. I, got this great job in this building working with like these big time doctors, right? It's like, I was all about it. Yeah. Right. Like, so I was brainwashed to think like at that time, like, this is how it is. Yeah. Right. It's like, I did a clinical down.
Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Down with a large orthopedic group that it's like, oh, I've got all the best protocols. I've got all the answers. Right. And it's like, I don't do any of those things now, yeah. Right. So again, fortunately, right, you experience things throughout your career and throughout your life that kind of like smack you in the face and it's like, yeah, you don't know shit, right? So, humble yourself quickly, and this is where now you start to look to get better. And then I think you touched on a good point. It's like what we do now, I preach to new grads and people that are trying to open their businesses all the time. I say like my biggest issue right now is the fact that it is so easy to learn how to market yourself and how to sell yourself and how to build a business. And nobody is preaching having something worth selling first. I shouldn't say nobody, right? But like, that's not the main thing because that's not sexy to people, right? Like you have people that are, learning to sell $300 an hour of the product that I delivered back when I would tell you that I was, a very low quality PT, right? So, at least for me personally, and this is still to this day, it's like I will always value like professional development first. And even though like now I have a business, right? So obviously I have to be able to spend time on the other stuff. But it's like if I had 1 hour in the day and I had to choose learning how to market or learning how to be a better PT, I'm using it on learning how to be a better PT, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's like if you're really good at what you do, at least like in the early going, right? Some of the other stuff isn't as important because your skill set is what's going to help sell yourself to begin with. Now, obviously, we know you have to spend time on the other things to build and grow over time, right? But I think that so much time needs to be put towards putting yourself in the environment to be able to grow, not just from like a time management standpoint or having the available time to put in the work, but being around people that you trust that are able to guide you. And that doesn't just mean like, hey, this is how you do things. It's helping you formulate questions, right? It's not getting 5 PTs that treat exactly how I treat. It's getting 5 PTs that know how to think for themselves, understanding basic principles, and then understanding how to formulate questions, and then knowing how to find the answers to those questions, right? That's how you build people that are like willing to grow over time, rather than just building, soldiers, right? Like yes men. It's like this is how Game Changer PT treats, right? Like this is how this clinic treats, right? And then you just start churning people out because it just becomes like a system.
Yeah. And it's hard to replicate that because we're in such a service-based business, right? I think the one common, misconception was people who want to start business, they want to read like, the E-Myth, which is like, turn everything into franchise. But because we're working with human and we are also human, there's a lot of soft skill involved. There's no replication of soft skill, right? But you can somewhat influence people on how they think, of like looking at outcome. I think what I take pride in what we do here with all our therapists, that we look at outcome similarly. We know the demands, what's going to be on the other side. So from there, the way I reverse engineer of how I treat is based on that outcome. But if all the therapists see the same outcome, it doesn't matter what their approaches are. We're looking to get the same outcome in the same timeline regardless. So I think that's a good way to start. And I love that you touched on that. And you're right, there are more resources of people opening up their own clinics, selling like, $250, $300, visit. But, while you can do that, I always think that if you're not truthful and you're not super confident in the product you put out, it will always come back to bite you in the ass at some point. Because if someone charges $250, guess what? Your product now is going to be compared to other PT that charge $250. And if your product is inferior, you're going to lose people. And you might get them for the first $250, but can you get them for the next $250? And that's why I'm going to see, I'm calling it right now, 5 years from now, the people who start their own clinic that does not have a true grab of bettering their service or bettering the product that they're delivering, those are the people who are going to struggle, and those are the people going to end up A, leaving the field, or B, just go do travel PT.
Honestly, I hope you're right.
Yeah.
You know, and then again, I'm not trying to knock like anyone within our profession, right? But at the end of the day, it's like, I think our first job is to do right by the patient.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, where are your priorities, right? Again, like being able to build a profitable business is way more lucrative than being a staff PT somewhere, right? Like that's just fact, right? Yeah. Owning a business is always going to be, you know, more lucrative than being an employee, right? But it's like, don't lose the core value or the morals of like still putting the patient first and doing what's best for them, and then work on like, how do I turn that into a profitable business? So if there is anybody who does not see that as their main interest and they're looking at it as a business first, healthcare second, then I hope you're right. I hope people see those things and decide like, no, I'm going to go somewhere else where I'm getting the value that I'm actually, you know, paying for.
It's just funny, man, because going back to how we were when we first started as new grads, while we don't know as much we know now, like obviously like with longer time horizon, with more mistake, you're going to learn more from those mistakes. I think we got good result, and I always reflect on this because we just care so much. Like I think at baseline, we care so much about our patient that we were willing to just try different things, learn different things, and even like stay after doing videos, even like we would talk about cases all the time, right, like in the lunchroom, because we want better. And I think that's the secret sauce of being a good PT is like, how much do you care for your patient, and are you willing to care enough to advocate for them and to do more outside of your clinical demands. And you know, like I've talked to other business owners in the past where people are complaining about not getting paid to do notes. Bro, we were doing notes till midnight.
Yeah.
And like that didn't stop us to do more content, to learn stuff, to read stuff, right? Just because we care, we care developing our skill set. I think that's why when we take that with us, because the skill set is something we can take with no matter what, and we start our business. I mean, you've been in business for 3 years. I've been in business going on 5, right? To me, I'm not surprised at that at all. Just because I know the products, it's great.
It is weird to look back at that experience, because I think that if I had a week, you know, like the volume that I had, you know, any given week back then, I mean, I don't even know what I would do right now, right? Like I'd vomit because it's not possible to do what I do at that volume.
Yeah.
That's if I knew what I know now back then, and I had the skill set and I had the knowledge and I had the understanding of what I wanted to do with each person, it still would not be possible to deliver the same product. Like, it just physically would not be. I don't think that you have to see one person an hour to provide value, right? That's not fair, right? There could be good PTs in those settings, right? Yeah. But it's just the fact that like what I do and the precision, or at least the attempt at the precision of what I'm trying to do for people, there are things that I catch, right, by looking at the details of the smallest exercise of what they do in a clinic, or what I'm doing with my hands, or what I'm watching them go from point A to point B in the clinic, right? Not even part of an exercise. That I can't do if I have 2, 3, 4 other people there, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, we saw 3 people, sometimes 4 people an hour, like as in that was the number of people scheduled within that hour. That doesn't mean that the previous people were done with their session.
True.
Right? Like it wouldn't be uncommon to have 6 people there at a time where someone shows up 15 minutes late. It's like, you're not turning those people away. You're figuring it out, right? So, you know, it's not saying that it's impossible, but or I should say, like, it's not saying that model shouldn't exist, right? But it's just like, be honest with what it is, right? Like, I would not be able to do what I'm doing having 3, 4, 5 other people in the clinic, and then that's going to have to negatively impact the quality of what I deliver, even if I'm capable of doing more. So again, like for me personally, because this is what my priorities are, I would not put myself in that situation. If I know I could do more and the situation I'm in is not allowing me to do not allowing me to do it, what am I doing there?
Yeah. I mean, I wrote a post on this last week, was like two things that cannot be true at the same time is high quality and high volume.
Sure.
It just doesn't work, because to deliver something that's in high quality, you need time, you need insight, you need time. Reflection is huge. And you run your mentorship, and I'm sure you preach on, you know, reflection on how you treat this week, what the patient outcome was, what was their response. Because if you have time to reflect, then you have time to think. If you have time to think, you have time to strategize, then you have time to get better. And then that's how you grow as a clinician. That's how your patients get better, right? And and just to kind of go back to your first, the last point was talking like being a business owner, yes, it's more lucrative, but you take on more risk. And the first risk you take is that if you don't have time to reflect and you deliver bad care, that bad care will carry and stay with you forever. One bad Google review will stick with you. Where if you're just a staff clinician and you have a bad patient, you have 4 other one coming in that you can, all right, well, I'll just try better on the next one.
Sure.
Where with us, one patient, one eval, like, dude, I used to complain about getting like 5 evals a day. Now I am like ecstatic when I see 5 eval because like that's 5 people I can help. But also there's also more risk associated with that. Because if I do one bad job on an eval, that's pretty much like impact my ability to put food on the table.
Oh yeah. I mean, I can't even tell you how many people, like colleagues, friends that, when I talk to them about the flexibility of my schedule, it's like, oh yeah, I just went away last week, and they're like, oh wow, must be nice. It's like, yeah, I have the flexibility to go away whenever I want, and I have the flexibility to not make money whenever I want, right? Like there's always a give and take, right? Mm-hmm. There is no perfect, but when you're working for somebody else, it's just kind of like you show up, you look at your schedule, it's like, oh man, I see 3, whatever color on the schedule is eval, right? It's like, this is going to be a busy day, or I have to do 3 of those notes, right? And now it's kind of like you view it differently, right? Whether, I offer free consultations as ways to kind of like meet new people and like you see those as opportunities, right? It's like, wow, I'm meeting this new person. I get to not just be able to help them, but I'm also learning, because like as I'm learning along the way and trying to evolve my model and evolve my treatment process, it's like you start to see different trends with how people are presenting, and now it's like, oh wow, like I feel very confident that I could help you, right? It's for me personally, at least, like evals or consults aren't just like new business, right? It's I'm still trying to decide, like, is this someone who's right for Game Changer PT, right? Because trying to sell somebody on coming in and paying a premium price who's not the right fit is not helping them.
Yeah.
Right. So that's part of the process too, of me trying to figure out, it's like, okay, is this somebody who's in line with like what I do? And then when it seems like it just like aligns perfectly, where you're like, this is somebody who's kind of been through the ringer. This is somebody who's struggling with certain things. And this is also somebody whose story sounds like something that you can impact. You get excited in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously there's the secondary benefit of like, it's your business, right? So that's revenue, right? Like that's building a business, that's making money, right? But it's no longer like the stress of like, oh no, like there's another one on my schedule.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, and I already have a full schedule and I have a new patient. How am I fitting them in for 15 times a week, right? Like I don't get that type of feeling anymore, which until you said that, I actually never thought about that. But that is interesting, because that's one stressor off the list.
I said it and I have to say it now, because our friend Jamie, when he would have like a 5-hour gap, and if you put an eval, this guy would pace back and forth. And I was talking to him on the phone. He would pace back and forth, so stressed. I was like, oh my God, they just put an eval on me. I have 4-hour breaks. But now, like he runs his own business. He's ecstatic when there's an eval put on him. He's like, dude, I got another eval. And I just go, bro, do you remember when you used to complain about evals? Yeah. He's like, I know, it's different now.
We've all been there.
I know. But what you described just now is what I've learned from a couple of my mentors is under the banner of like ethical selling, right? Making sure that if you can do if you can provide the right outcome for the specific group of people you can help, it is your moral obligation to tell them, like, I am the right fit for you. You are the right fit for me. The outcome you're looking for, your value matches my value. And therefore, if I don't try to sell you on what I do to help you to achieve that outcome, it will be unethical for me. And I think most people fall into the banner of sales is they're just trying to sell for everyone. And when you become a service for everybody, then you're a service for nobody. And I think that's why sales get kind of really has a bad preconceived notion, almost like a used car salesperson, right? But in a medical field, we can do it in the most ethical way, where if you can identify that, hey, this is what they want to get back into, this is the outcome they want. I have treated someone just like them and get them the best outcome they can. And to me, the price point is arbitrary. The price point is just a contract of, hey, you give me this money, and in agreement, I will give you this outcome, and even more, right? Because if someone pay $250 for your service and you provide a value that's worth $500, that's ethical. You're doing so much right by them. Where if they pay $250 and all they get back is $250, then it's a break even point. That could be, argue whether it's good or bad. I always like to over deliver. And again, another thing that's ethical is that if they pay you $250 and you don't do right by them by convincing them to stay with you, and they end up paying someone else $250 that would not give them the same outcome, then I think you fail that person in front of you.
The biggest problem I see is there's the human element in all this, right? Like let's be real, like the same marketing and sales books exist for all of us, right? All these mentorships are all selling from the same books that we all read, right? It comes down to the individual who's learning the information and how they decide to apply it, right? That's the unfortunate thing, right? It comes down to how the human decides to then use that information. They could use it for good or they could use it for bad, right? There's some people who claim, I need to see if we're a good fit, and yet they've never once told anybody they're not a good fit, right? There's the people who are learning how to respond to rejection, but then they're doing it in such a way that it's just like, like that we're no longer talking about the same things, right? It still comes down to the honesty effect of it, and whether or not you actually are truly doing something that is in the best interest of the patient. I mean, I had somebody one time, I had this kind of like self-proclaimed business guru try to weaponize the birth of my daughter as a reason to sign up with him because I could not afford not to sign up with him with a child coming.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like,
yeah, that's pretty
block.
Yeah.
And I blocked him.
Yeah.
And like that was my experience with that person. And that person was probably using a tactic that they learned from all of their readings of books to try to get me to sign on. It's like, first off, at the time that person contacted me, my business was thriving. I didn't need him. Yeah. Right. I was recommended to like inquire about working with him. And that was like, I will never work with that person now. Right. So like there's all these like different, I use the word tactic, right? Because that's what it feels like. It's and I understand the concept of sleazy sales. It does come down to how somebody applies it, right? And the intention behind it. Yes. Right. But it's also understanding like what it is that you're actually learning and just being a good person first, right? It's like speak in a way that someone else is going to have a good experience like in that conversation, and don't try to make someone feel less than or make someone feel like they have to buy something, right? Like you have to be honest with them because we can't in our field, we can't guarantee anything. Yeah. We can't even guarantee outcomes. We can say that we feel confident based off of this, that this is what I would do, but then it's like, we need to see what happens, right? And I'm going to do this expecting this particular outcome. And if it doesn't happen, that's okay, but that tells us something. And then this is what we need to do from there, right? So it's not even just telling people like, I feel confident that I could provide an outcome to you. It's that I'm the person who is going to work tirelessly in order to get you that outcome. Because I can't guarantee anything. Yeah. Right? Like there are things outside of our control within our scope of practice that could influence why somebody does not reach their outcomes. What they need is they need to understand through my expertise, like how do they navigate those situations, right? I feel confident in getting a lot of people their outcomes, a very, very, very large percent, right? But it's like, what happens when X, Y, or Z happens? Like that's what I'm able to help provide you. And so that you can troubleshoot these things, you could take this information and learn long-term, like whenever you and I are done working together, whether that's one session, whether that's a year, right? And this is what I explain to people. I explained during my consult, I explained during the eval, it's like, I'm being as honest as possible. If anyone is selling you on guaranteeing that in 6 sessions this is going to happen, it's like they might be right, but they're lying, right? And I don't think it's intentional, right? Everyone in our field intends to do well, right? You don't go into this field trying to hurt people. Fair. No one's trying to hurt people, right? Now, some people have a higher standard of quality of care, but no one's coming into this field trying to hurt anyone, trying to negatively influence anybody, right? There's just some people that value like making the dollar more so than doing right by the patient, right? Like that's a completely different conversation. So it's like no one's outwardly intentionally lying to a patient, but like what does honesty look like in the context of that conversation with the patient. And I think that's where a lot of people sometimes miss the boat, right? And more so in the application of the information. It's not the information itself. All these coaches, these groups have great information, right? Because they all get it from the same place, right? All we do is recycle information, right? We do the same thing like through our profession, right? We're recycling information. We're learning from people that have more experience from us, right? It then comes down to the application and how well we're able to do it. Again, doing it within the lens of our core values and our morals and ethical practice and things like that, which comes down to the human element.
I mean, this is why God gave people free will, right? The power to take control of your own decision-making process, but also going back to doing the thing to serve the person in front of you according to your core value, and according to your ethical standard and according to their value and their ethical standard. I think it has to be a big match in the beginning. There's time where we took on people who are not the right fit for us, and that relationship does not do well just because there was a mismatch, right? If someone come in and they value, static stretching, and they want to just do nothing and just lay on the table, like that's not a good match for us. Like most people would gladly take their money, but the best part about being in a practice, you run it well, is that at the end of the day, like you need the money, but you don't need the money. That's like, I'm okay walking people. We have like 15 clinic within 5 mile radius. I'm okay with, and the company we used to work for is down the road from me. I'm okay literally handhold people, walk them down the block because, hey, I think you're a better fit here. And just because according to what they're looking for, that is their best fit, right? Because I'm not going to, it's my job is not to change people of what they perceive to be valuable for them. They come in already know what they value. It happens to be a good fit, great, let's work together. I think we can do some cool stuff together. If it's not a good fit, hey, there's a better fit for you and I'll send you over there. And I love you to talk about that because I approach it to like we're both married. I approach it as marriage, right? That, like as you're saying your wedding vow, you want to take care of your wife, but at the end of the day, you can't guarantee her happiness forever. I tell my wife all the time, like, it's not my job to make you happy. It's my job to give you the best environment for you individually to be happy. But I'm not responsible for that. Neither are you. It's too much pressure on both of us, right? I was like, I am responsible for my own happiness and you doing your best to support me on that. And I will do the same. And it's the same thing as how we approach employees, how we approach patients. We're like, hey, you know what it takes for you to be happy. And if we agree on that, I can create the environment. I can give you the tool. I can give you my perspective or like the way I do things to get you there, help you get there. At the end of the day, like, you have to be the hero of your own journey. And our job as PT, we're more Alfred than we are Batman. It's our job to pick up Batman when he's like falling off the roof because he's doing some dumb shit all over again. And he has this gripe that he has to like overcorrect his parents' bad decisions, solving, but that's our job, right? And that's why I love like this whole approach is like, is the ownership is on us to help people, but ultimately it's up to them to help themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's a human element.
Yeah. Right?
Like you can't think something for somebody else, right? You have no idea what somebody else's reality is, right? You have no idea what other people are going through or you're saying words, but you don't know what they're hearing, right? Like you could say the same sentence to 10 different people and they could hear 5 different messages, right? So like there's always going to be that element of like when you work in a service industry serving people that you just need to appreciate and keep in the back of your mind. And then you just do your best to, learn how to portray your message in a very consistent way that is actually landing with the people that you hope hear it. But yeah, no, I completely agree. Although I do feel a little bit more like Batman. So
well, before anything, you didn't mention how you used to moonlight as Freddie Prinze Jr. when you were before you grow this Rasputin beer.
First off, most people probably don't even remember who Freddie Prinze Jr. is at this point. So that's a funny story in itself. But I did make that comment to like a high school, maybe college patient one time, and they just stared at me like, who's Freddie Prinze Jr.? I was like, come on. Like, I'm not trying to get you to believe I look like him, but you got to at least know who he is. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't look like Freddie Prinze Jr., but it was a very funny 2 weeks where it seemed like I thought you were going up to the front desk and telling everyone who walked in, when you come in, tell this guy he looks like Freddie Prinze Jr., because there was no other explanation as to how that many people could have told me that.
Oh, I did. That's exactly what I did.
Because I had never heard it prior to that. And then for like a week straight, 3-4 people just like... just out of nowhere start telling me.
I had to Google Freddie Prinze Jr. from like Scooby-Doo was like, hey, does this not look like Jeremy?
Man.
And then I pre-frame it as soon as they see it, and when they see you, it was on. And that was great.
That was the worst, because at that time too, I remember like when you Googled his name, he must have just had like either like a wart removed or a surgery, because he had this like bandage on his neck. Do you remember this? Yeah. So he had this huge bandage on his neck. He was graying, and I'm like, great. So this is when everybody looks up like what I look like, it's like him in his most disheveled look. He's a good looking guy, but like not in that picture.
Oh yeah, that was great time, man. Just to switch gear real quick before we get off topic, let's talk about your journey in, obviously your previous company kind of shutting down, almost put a rug underneath you, but then you roll with the punches, kind of force you to really start your own business out of necessity. So what was the process like? How do you tactically, mentally prepare, and how did you what advice would you impart on some people who were having that situation being done to them now?
When I was working for that company, I was a clinic director at the time, and quite honestly, I had autonomy to treat how I want, run the clinic how I want. Like I was basically given the responsibility of running it like an individual business owner. And the funny thing was, my wife ran the performance side. So we had PT and performance, and my wife and I essentially ran the clinic. And we worked really well together. So I was given a lot of responsibility. Obviously the business had marketing people and salespeople and things like that, right? So it wasn't like I was really alone, but at least in that location, it was my responsibility to build my caseload, to build relationships. I was really the only person in Monmouth County, communicate with the performance staff, communicate with my aide, communicate with our front desk. And, it was a lot of experience that I got that I would need to run my own clinic. Obviously, there's other things that play a role in running your own business. But, when we kind of ran into that speed bump to where they were deciding to kind of leave Monmouth County, I had realized like, okay, they were great with me. So besides the fact that I always had a great experience working with them, like they were completely supportive when I told them like I was going to start my own thing. They actually basically allowed me to keep my patients because they didn't have a Monmouth County location, and it wouldn't have been feasible for my patients to drive up to North Jersey, right? There wasn't like a non-compete situation in play. They were incredibly supportive. They also understood. It's like, yeah, like we understand coming up here 5 days a week. Eventually, what I said to them actually was, I could probably do this for a short period of time, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you guys out, because I'm going to do this for a month, 2 months. I'm going to burn out with this commute, with the full caseload. Yeah. Like I'd rather just like do this cold turkey and again, like bet on myself and try to do this down here myself. And that's actually what I said to them. It's like, I knew 30 days was a very short period of time, but it's like, how long could I do an hour and a half commute plus working a full caseload, with all that stuff. Yeah. So I decided that just wasn't going to work for me. So I was fortunate to find a very quick spot that was going to build out an office for me, and it wasn't too far from where I lived. Now, at that time, because I was brand new to this, I was completely cash based, and I was a little bit of a different price point, but didn't have billing insurance as an option for people. So, leaving the out of network insurance model, also from a different price point, all my current patients weren't necessarily able to stick with me, right? And an element of that was obviously just the shock factor of like, oh, I'm going from, either not owing something or owing $10, and now all of a sudden I'd have to pay like $150 an hour. And it's like, okay, I didn't mind, but I was able to start day one with patients on my schedule. So I was very fortunate with that not everyone gets to do, right? And then from there, right, it was basically learning on the fly, right? Like trying to get people to tell other people, trying to do some of the stuff that I don't really value, to be honest, which was like, not that I don't value going out into the community, but like the way that I was trying to meet people at the time was kind of like, throwing the wall and seeing what sticks, right? Like trying to talk to everybody and just like, oh, I've got this business, I got to get people in now, right? And then obviously I learned over time kind of how to be a little bit more calculated with that. At the time, I originally joined like a business mentorship group, and just what I tried to do was try to have the best relationship possible with the gym that I was in. Now they were brand new at that location at the same time. They had another location which was really successful. For whatever reason, no matter what I did, they just had no interest with utilizing me at the other space. That's a conversation for another day. And I think that at least for people that might be looking to do this, that might be part of the experience to learn from, where it's like, do your due diligence with the relationships that you choose to build, right? Like things might look really good on the surface, but if it's not the right relationship, at least from a business standpoint, it's not going to be like well suited for you. And I think I learned that along the way too, where, like I got along with them personally. They seemed like nice guys, but in hindsight, they were just using me to offset their rent, right? They didn't see the value of having a PT with the clients that they had, and it was a little unfortunate because it was, in my opinion, a missed opportunity. But what I was able to do is build a relationship with. We were in a hockey rink, so some of the coaches and figure skating coaches in there, and be able to kind of expand within that building itself and get to know some people. And then COVID hit. Like, sometimes. What was it? I guess less than 6 months into that. I opened in September of 2019. I got married in December. COVID hit in March. And, if we put ourselves back in the shoes of March 2020, like no one knew what it was, right? It's not like how we talk about it now, right? So let's be real. Like there was fear associated with it. There was the uncertainty. And I don't even mean like business wise. Like we're talking health. We had no idea what it was, right? So I shut down, and I think I closed for like 3 months. And at that time, I actually like left the business group that I was with because I had been open 3 months. I didn't have capital. Like I didn't have cash flow. So as much as it could have been useful information, like financially it wasn't in the cards for me. So I decided to leave the group that I was in. During that time, like I just doubled down on my own education. I didn't do a whole lot of virtual stuff. I did some for the people that like I knew needed it, but it wasn't really something I valued with my business, just with the way that I do things. So I just kind of used that time to get better at what I do, to be honest, from a treatment standpoint. And that's where all that time was spent. Actually, I had a lot of resistance even opening, even though PTs were essential. Like I was fought tooth and nail because I was a sublease of a sublease. So I wasn't even actually technically part of any paperwork for the entity of the ice rink. So I was told that I wasn't allowed back in the building, even though I legally, I guess I shouldn't say should have been, because I guess legally I wasn't on the paperwork, right? But at least with respect to our profession, we were allowed to be open at that time. So there was a lot of kind of like issues at that time. Fortunately, I want to say I was back in the clinic somewhere between like June and July. And being one-on-one, again, fortunately, like there wasn't a whole lot of resistance to coming back into the clinic from patients. I think a couple people maybe decided to not come back that would have otherwise needed to. But, like it was low volume. The gym was closed because the gyms had issues for a really long time being allowed to open back up. So I had this like essentially this huge gym, and it was just like me and a patient there at a time. So it was actually like not all that bad. Yeah. So I'm there. You're going through like 2020, and then all of a sudden, this is the craziest thing, and not a lot of people know this. I think it was Halloween. I get a call from somebody at the ice rink, and they go, "Do you know what's going on?" I go, "What are you talking about?" And meanwhile,
it's always a good start to a conversation, right?
I have family over. We're having a Halloween party. Yes, apparently that's a thing. Blame my wife. And I'm like sweating bullets. He's like, the gym guys are here with a U-Haul. They're moving their stuff out. I'm like, what?
Oh my God.
Yeah, they decided to not renew their lease for November. This is Halloween.
Wow.
I go, what? And then this guy who, I don't remember his role with the rink. Maybe he was like he was more than a maintenance guy, but I'll call him a maintenance guy. And he said, yeah, and they want me to change the locks like tomorrow. This is I remember, this is a Sunday, Halloween Sunday. I have patients on the schedule the next day.
Yeah.
I also have family over. So everything that you could be thinking about here, it's like, I'm giving 24 hours notice that this place isn't renewing their lease. Are you kidding me? You're trying to change your locks on, like all this stuff. Like, what do I do with my patients? What's going to happen with my business when people think that I'm the most disorganized person when all this stuff is just actually happening around me, right? So all this stuff happened within like the first, year and a half of me opening. And it's crazy. I always say, like, I actually do really well in situations like that. I do terrible with low stress situations.
When you have more time to think, because you overthink everything.
Dude, I handle small things the worst. Like I blow up over small things. This, I was like, get 12 people on the phone. I was doing this, and this, right? My people were incredible during all this. And like my patients are the only reason that my business survived that, because they were incredible through the entire thing. I offered to pay my own rent and just, if the rink would allow me to stay in the meantime, just until I found something else. They said no. Why? No idea. Basically, what ended up happening was I was able to find a gym really close to where I lived for a period of time that let me just open up a fold-up table. Very, very, very small gym. He was a very busy kind of personal training clinic, so it really wasn't the best situation. But I was forever grateful that he allowed me to do that, and we did almost I think it was a rent on like a bi-weekly basis. Like he was incredible to me. And again, like it wasn't the best situation from a business standpoint, but he hooked me up like really, really well. And during that time, I then was introduced to the guys at Iron House, which is where I am now in Freehold, and they were building out a spot. And then it basically just came down to waiting out the amount of time for that build out to be done. And I think I was in this pop-up shop, Leaks Fitness. I'll give him a plug because he did do me a solid. And how for, I think it was 3 months, 3 months of basically fold-up table, like 3 square feet worth of space, right? Patients that are used to, having a nice office, big gym, personal setting, all this stuff, right? They're paying this premium price. And my patients were great about it. And then, once Freehold opened up, I've been there ever since. We have a great relationship. We work really well together. It's pretty much everything you would want in like a working like business relationship. They were new, like we're growing together. We help each other out with different things. We work really well. We speak a common language. So it's been a very unique path for sure. Hopefully, if anything, people that may be like looking from afar, making certain assumptions as to how certain businesses run, maybe it'll help them realize it's like people hit their own speed bumps like in their own way, right? Like there are curveballs thrown all the time, right? So what you get to see on the surface is just the outcome, right? There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes that people have to deal with, and you just get to see what they want you to see, right? So I'm grateful for the people that have been able to help me along the way. I'm very fortunate. Also being such like a small operation that I didn't have a lot of overhead during that time. So I wasn't hemorrhaging money during the times where revenue may have been like down during those times, which definitely helped me out. And now, it seems like a distant memory, which is crazy.
It's time fly, man. I love that you brought up COVID, just because it's kind of going back to what we talked about before. It's like, obviously being a business owner, you have a good upside, but you also have a tremendous downside when it comes to risk. And COVID was not easy for us either. Like you, I got married January 2020, hired my second PT and another full-time staff on March 2020. And then 15 days later, COVID hit and I was like freaking out. So like, I didn't want to lay anyone off at all. So it was my promise to them, because when you found people that align with your values and you want to take care of them. So I didn't pay myself for a whole year. I went like no salary, and I was just living off of like saving to pay my rent and everything else. It was definitely a tough time, but just to kind of go back to how you pivoted on your situation, because there's always going to be situation. And for people who are listening that, let's say they come here to visit my clinic, they see all this nice stuff. We didn't have this. This is new. And people will pay premium price for the interaction, for the outcome, for the knowledge of the PT. That's why having a high quality service and product is so much more important than all the bill and whistle that we have here. Like we have great equipment now, but that's just an add-on, right? It's not our bread and butter. Our bread and butter is the interaction, the strategy, the things that we can do for our patient to get them better to where they need to be. That's what they pay for. They could care less. And you and I has been to many, many places with all the bill and whistle, but they lack clinical care. So to me, if we were going to talk about unethical selling, that would be unethical selling, because it's pretty much like they give you a cardboard version of, actually, do you watch Friends?
Yeah, sure.
Do you remember the one episode where Joey pretended he has a Porsche? And he has boxes stack up, and he put
I think it's Porsche.
Porsche, sorry. Yeah. He put like the cover on it. Yeah. He has all the hat. So like, and then like he tried to like impress all these girls that he has a nice car, but it's just a cardboard. And that's exactly what it is. When don't be caught up by like all the glitz and glamour of like all the fancy stuff. But in reality, you got to understand like the true principle. I think to bring it all back around, right? It's all going back to what you and I talk about, like is the fundamental of the principle of how you do things, how you conduct yourself as a person, as a PT, and as a business owner. That's going to get you the patient that you want and the outcome that you want. Because otherwise, if you don't have that, then you don't have a business. And honestly, like what's your life stand for?
What I tell PTs is I think you need to realize what you want out of your business, right? Like learn skills from other people if you're talking about like building a business. But at the end of the day, like you don't need to build what somebody else has if that's not what you care about, right? If you don't want a staff, if you don't want overhead, okay, so do that, right? Like now, are you going to have the same revenue as someone who has like 10 PTs? Like probably not, right? Yeah. Like at the end of the day, most likely not. But it's like, what do you care about? Do you know what you care about? Which you don't need that answer immediately, and that answer is allowed to change, obviously, right? But like build a business in your image, right? Do whatever it is that you're comfortable with, right? So, I mean, I'll tell you, I charge $300 an hour for people that come out of pocket. I have a shared office, right? I have a shared office. I have one treatment table in there. Now, I think it's quality stuff. And then there's a 3,000 square foot gym with, everything that you need from a gym standpoint, right? But during this time, right, I had a fold up table in, a small gym, right? I've been in 3 different locations in 3 years. All things out of my control, right? Not just me like moving around. But what I tell people is that like my job is to work every single day to justify what I'm doing, right? To bring you that value, to justify being worth that rate for the people that work with me. And I take that very seriously, right? It's not just like, oh, you were told by somebody else to come here, so I know I've got you. Great. No, I'm working just as hard for you as I'm working for this person, right? I don't care if you're a professional athlete. I don't care if you're a 60-year-old grandmother playing on the floor. It's like I'm working just as hard for each one of these people, right? And I'm justifying what it is that I'm charging. And then if over time I decide for my business that moving to this type of location with this aesthetics is just part of what I want, then great. Do you need that to be successful? No. If you want it, also great. Like there is no rules, right? It's what do you want for your business? What do you want to grow it into? And where do you see yourself 5, 10, 15 years or whatever? And that's allowed to evolve too, right? If anything, it should evolve. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, because you're going to care about different things as you get older and, as you experience different things in life, right? Like I'm married and I have a daughter, right? So like what I care about today is very different than 5 years ago when I wasn't married and didn't have a daughter, right? So to bank on maybe like a 5-year plan that I made 5 years ago, it's like, well, all the other variables have changed, right? So it's like I've got to pivot with the times a little bit and do something that matters now, right? Like my responsibility is my family first. And then it's like, okay, cool. Now that I've got that set, like, and that can't take a back seat. Now what can I grow around that?
And I love that you touched on that, dude. Just anytime I have like anyone who wants to do like business consultation with me, it's always going back like, how do you want your lifestyle to be? Because I truly believe, and this was the trap that I fell early in the years, was the business is my life, but really it's the business should just be a vehicle for me to get the lifestyle that I want. But then I have to get really clear on what I want in life and then work towards that. And to your point, the matrix of success is really subjective. Like your success and my success are completely different, and someone else's success is completely different, right? And you got to understand, like, there's a level of sacrifice that you have to do to achieve a certain amount of success. To have a to have a 6-figure business will require you X amount of doing to get there, but then to get to 7, it will require way more and way more headache and way more problems, different kind of problems, right? You still have problems regardless, but the problem might be a little bit more grand. Are you willing to upgrade your life to then deal with the problem that you're going to face to achieve those outcomes? Sure. If you're not, I think it's totally okay to be like, hey, great, I'm good with this and where I am. Like I know many happy, successful business owners because they have realized that this is what they want. They don't want to go anymore and they don't want to do any less. As long as they understand that's what they want, the problem, they're now worth it. Right? But if you want an 8-figure business and you have no idea how to get there, and 8-figure business come with massive payroll and you don't want to pay people, now there's there's a huge discrepancy on what you want and what you can actually achieve. And that's how you really get, super unfulfilled life, because there's a huge mismatch in what you wanted to do.
Sure. 7 years ago, I signed on for $72,000, right? Like, if I was making $90,000 now and doing so working 15 hours a week, like, let's just say that is where it ended.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, I was working 40 hours a week, seeing what was it, 75? I don't even remember the numbers, right? I think I've made things up in my head over the years. Like, I've said like 150, right? Like, who knows?
1 million.
Yeah, 1 million patients a week. I don't know, right? So it's like, now you look at the quality of that time, right? It's like, okay, so in 25 less hours and, 80 less patients, right? So people sometimes they just need to be reminded, like, the perspective of, it's like, you're still in a better space compared to what you left in order to do your business, right? Don't keep comparing yourself to somebody who has more unless you understand how to just use that as a motivator. Don't use it as a stressor, right? Like, if that motivates you to work hard, phenomenal, right? You're using it for good. If you're looking at it and being like, this person has so much and I'm only doing this, like, that's not useful in any way, right? So now you're talking about, okay, it's $72,000 salary. It's like, if you're making $150, and again, you're doing so working 20 hours a week, it's like, yeah, but I want $1 million business. It's like, well, what are we talking? Like, okay, if that's your goal, that's fine. But it's like, are you mad at the 150 working half as many hours? Like, like, or do you just only look for that next goal and you're unhappy because you're not at that next goal, right? Like, just always remind yourself, like, you could look at things on the micro scale, you could look at things on the macro scale, right? And again, as long as you have the mindset to, again, use it as a motivator and be excited about it, right? Or use it as like, this is being goal oriented, or this is what I'm working towards, then great. But you always need to remember, like, where you came from, and like, maybe look at like things by the year, but then compare things to 5, 6, 7 years ago and realize, like, you're in a pretty good space, right? And then you just work to make it sustainable. You work to make it efficient. And then it's like, if your goals change, then you have to understand, it's like, now, instead of being a $250,000 clinic and not having a staff, it's like, I know in order to get to 500, it's like, probably not going to do that alone, or if I right, like, or I'm going to need this, and that's when you work to, like, who do I get to learn from or work with to be able to expand to that point, because that's not something I've done to this point, right? That's kind of what like goals evolving means, as opposed to, again, like, I think right now it's just like looking at somebody who's 20 years in being like, I want that. It's like, whoa, like, first off, like, you're still an undergrad. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, just looking at two very like distant points. But I mean, I think that's also like the social media world, right? Like, it's really easy to compare yourself to other people. So that would be like probably my biggest recommendation for somebody who is getting into business is like, don't compare yourself to somebody, whether it's like you're chapter 1, someone's chapter 12, or you're both on chapter 1, but it's just a completely different book. It's like, understand what you want out of your life and your business, right? And just work towards that. And then, like, build relationships if you want to learn some skills that maybe you don't have, get better at certain things. And, things tend to progress in time as long as you're putting in the work, which most people that are opening their business are probably willing to put in that work.
I mean, I read this one passage to myself like every morning, right? A fulfilled man has everything he needs because he doesn't have any wants. And I think that just shows so much perspective, because I can just look at all the things I have and realize that, like, wow, like 10 years ago, I would kill to have everything that I have now.
Sure. And
I can just really enjoy it and be like, oh, well, I don't like, it's Christmas time, right? And then everyone's always asking me, what do you want for Christmas? Like, honestly, I have everything that I need. Like, anybody needs something, it's already is on its way.
Right.
So I think that's a really good perspective to have in both life, in business, in clinical, because there's no such thing as fast tracking it. I think everyone wants to get to that. They want to fast track their success so they can, what are you in a rush for? To go where?
Right.
I have been fortunate enough to be in a room filled with people who has, 8 figures, 9 figures, businesses. And you know what? We have the same problems. Their problems just a little bit more massive. They're living the life that they want to live, but sometimes their stress is outweighing the benefits of what the business has offered them. And I don't ever want to be a fat guy in a BMW, right? Where you just sacrifice everything to get the BMW, but then you're just giving up everything else. Man,
I am a fat guy in a BMW.
I just no, you're not.
It's a 2015 BMW, but it's
but like people self-sacrifice a lot, man, to get something that is someone else's standards, not their own. And I think that's lead to unfulfilled life. And I think we can end on a good note, right? I think like I love catching up with you, man. It's obviously last time we saw each other was over the summer. Like I love hearing your perspective, especially now like you're a father, you run your business for 3 years, and you're a husband as well. I think I have to give you a lot of credit because like you're obviously have grown as just an excellent role model for people you mentor. And I know you do a lot of that, even though you don't advertise it. And so if anyone looking for good mentorship in both clinical, right, and then but get some business advice, some life advice, maybe parenting advice now, who knows, but you can definitely reach out to him for like a one-stop shop in a way. And I just love it, man. I just love catching up, the fact that we can kind of go back in time together, see how it come up. And I want to give you credits where just to see your progression through social media, to talking to you on the phone, to catching up. Like I just love it because that's what life is about. Life is too short not to make progression.
I think sometimes it's a funny thing when you talk about like how relationships evolve over the years, because when you meet somebody, it's almost like that, not just that first impression, right? Because we spend every single day together, but like that impression of, I don't know, how you interpret someone's personality, like who you think they are. It's like you have a memory of like 7 years ago, right? It's like I joke sometimes. It's like those people in high school either that you liked or maybe didn't like for whatever reason, right? How long ago was that?
Yes.
Right? But you still have the same impression of those people. Meanwhile, how much has changed for those people?
Yeah.
You don't know them at all anymore. The people that you don't stay in touch with.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Like the people that maybe like were immature in high school. It's like they're probably very nice people with children and families. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like things evolve over time, right? And as you like mature and learn different things, like you carry yourself differently, you speak in different ways, your priorities change, your conversations change, right? Think about our conversations in like a professional setting, like you showing up with like fishnet on and like deep V, right? Like small things like that, which don't get me wrong, I'm still extremely immature and I still like to have fun at work, but it's like, right, like that's the memory of interaction with certain people. It's like the times that you spend with them. But then it's like years go on, a lot of things change. And unless you're continuing to speak to people and see what they're doing and learn from like their experiences too, because your experience over the last 7 years has been different than mine. Both work, personal, right, everything. So you have different things to be able to offer the conversation. I have different things to be able to offer the conversations. We can learn from each other, even though it's like we consider ourselves friends that we don't see each other as frequently, but like when we catch up, it's like we could talk about things that we probably spoke about 7 years ago. It's like, well, there's so much that's happened since, right? Like there's so much more that we could talk about now. So it's just, I don't know. I think it's crazy sometimes to think about as time goes on, but now I start just sounding like a really old dude who's like thinking about the good old times, right?
At least you use Instagram. And I think what I like about this podcast episode is that we went to the past, we won't stay in the past, right? And I think that's where most people get, and I'm thankful, like there's 2 high school friends I stay in touch with, and we can reflect on the past, but then like have something to look forward to the future. And I think that's a really meaningful relationship. And I appreciate, our relationship to be able to have those kind of conversation.
Sometimes it's useful too to learn from the past too. Like constantly bringing up, which isn't always fun, right? If we're talking about potentially like negative experiences, sometimes it helps like reframe some things you might be dealing with in the present. It's like, oh, you're right, that did happen in the past. Maybe I should handle it a little differently.
Maybe I'm just bringing up like all the suppressed trauma. You're gonna go drive home with a stress ball in your hand. You're like nervous. So, hey man, before I let you go, where can people find you?
Game Changer Physical Therapy is in Freehold, New Jersey. Instagram, Game Changer PT _NJ. One day I'll get more involved on YouTube and things like that. But
on TikTok.
Yeah,
Can I see
you'll see me dancing.
Yeah,
you'll see me,
with your daughter.
Right. So so Instagram, do a lot of educational stuff, both for patients and clinicians. Try to speak in a language that everybody can kind of absorb and understand. But otherwise, in the clinic, right, all one-on-one PT in the Monmouth County area, and that's where you can find me.
Are you taking on students? Are you hiring anything?
So I'm not taking on students anymore. Right now, there's just too much happening.
Somewhere else, someone else ruined that experience for everybody.
Well, well, no, I do have a lot of people stop in, volunteer, come in like one day at a time, things like that, which I don't mind. But yeah, right now it's just not a great time to have somebody, come in for 3 months full time. There's just a lot of things happening right now. Am in the process of bringing on a PT. We'll wait until that's kind of like formalized to introduce him, but I am excited about that. And then, like you said, like I do like one-on-one mentorship for PTs, chiros, performance coaches. I don't advertise it because it's just one of those things where I keep a very low number of seats open because it is all one-on-one. It is time consuming.
It's like a speakeasy.
Well, it's an underground something.
Yeah.
To be honest, like I don't accept everybody who reaches out. I actually recently told somebody that I just didn't think that he was ready for what it is that I'm offering, and then I kind of like direct him to other areas. So it's something that I do, but my main thing is still treatment in the clinic, so that is my priority. And if time slots open up and somebody reaches out, then I might have some availability. But that is something that I do on the side too.
Cool. All right, man. Thank you so much for your time, bro. I really appreciate it. What a great time to catch up.
Yeah, man. This is fun. Appreciate it.
All right, man. I'll talk to you, and then let's get you more. I know, Cody. You want to go. All right. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care. Thank you for tuning in. If you like more information, check out badassclinicians.com. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do so you don't miss an episode. And see you next time.